All right. Hey, everybody. So today we're going over front ends, and I'm actually going to go over 3 different kinds of front ends. I couldn't put this up on the GitHub repo, so therefore I sent you all a zip file of exactly what I'm going to go over. I sent that over to the Slack channel, so if you want to utilize any of the templates, just download that, open it up. You'll see exactly what I'm going to see today. Within that folder, let me open this up. Are you all seeing this screen? Can someone indicate maybe like a thumbs up or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So here we have 3 different kinds of front ends. I'm going to go over each one. We're going to first talk about Dash, and Dash is basically very similar to Jupyter Dash, just not within your Jupyter notebook. Then we're going to talk about Flask, which is more of a web app, whereas Dash is more of a dashboard. And then I'll show you all how to do a combination of both. Now, for any of these are all my former projects. I did take away sensitive data, so it might not all run perfectly in your when you launch it on your own. I'll show you how to launch each of these as well. I think it should though, because I believe I also added the data files. Yeah, the data files should be in there. Everything's pickled, so it should be fine. But yeah, there might be some things that you have to pip install as you do this. So I'll show you all how to do that. And this will be done throughout the terminal as well. And then, yeah, there are a bunch of files within each of these, and I'll just point you all to what are the things that you should change if you wanted to do something as a front end. But before I get into that, some considerations first. If you want to take your model and use that as a front end, first important thing to think about is what are your inputs going to be? You have to think about within your front end, no matter which one of these you decide to go with, and I'll talk about the distinguishing features between the 3. Think about how you want to take in your inputs. All of these, I believe, are actually going to be my NLP projects. So I just take in raw text data. And if you're taking in text data, you have to think about what is necessary to process this input text data. So for example, if you're using like TF-IDF or SpaCy, you need to find some way to pickle either your TF-IDF vectorizer or your TF-IDF vectorizer. Maybe you want to load your SpaCy library as well. All of this will also have to be in script. So I'm going to show you all what that looks like in a little bit. I think it'll be easier to talk through these processes with an example. So the first I'm going to talk about is Dash. So this Dash doesn't have any modeling. So I'm going to cd into the Dash folder first. I'll get more into modeling with the Flask app. So if I cd into Dash, you can see that the main thing you're going to work off of is an app.py file. And so if I actually open this up, oops, oh, what did that do? Oops, let's X that out. I use Atom. You can use VS Code. Jupyter Lab, I think, works as well. Anything that allows you to do text edited things that isn't a notebook. So I'm launching Atom, and I'll show you guys what this looks like. So this is Atom. Let me zoom in a little bit. And in here, I have the app.py. This is the main file that you're going to work off. This is just a CSV with my data. So this is the data that I'm using to put on my dashboard. There's no modeling in this example, by the way. And then also, this is just a pickle file. Should not have opened this, but it's a pickle file for whatever I'm going to put on my dashboard. Let me first launch this as well. So it depends on what version of Python you're using. But for mine, because I use Python 3, it depends on, I think for most of you, it should be regular Python mapping to Python 3, see if it works. But I usually just do Python 3 Python 3 app.py. That basically says, using Python 3, run my app.py file. Once I launch that, something's going to come up, and it's actually going to say, let's see over here, there's some warnings over here, not very important, but here it's saying Dash is running on this, and it's actually running off of a Flask backend. Flask is what we're going to talk about later, but if you're just doing Dash by itself, you don't have to worry about Flask. So if I copy this URL and paste it in my browser over here, this is my dashboard. How I set up this dashboard is exactly the same as how I set up Jupyter Dashboard I talked about 2 weeks ago. So for that, I would refer to that video in setting up all of these things. So this is just a very, very extra simple dashboard. What I have here is like a 3D scatter plot. This is actually using dimensionality reduction. I forget how many dimensions, I put it to 3D so you could like analyze searches. So here there are some IDs I can drop down. This actually doesn't affect anything. And then as an example, here I put a text box where you can have an input and have an output. So this is my input. You can see that this updates automatically. So instead of just having this update automatically, you could technically put your machine learning model behind that, have this be your text input. And then once you click enter, or you can even put a button somewhere here, refer to Dash's documentation for this. And then you can have it run your model. So this is, you can definitely do modeling within Dash as well, especially if it's a simpler input. So this is how you do that. This is how you launch it. Going back to here to just explain what's going on over there. Within this app.py, I would actually recommend that if you plan to do just a dashboard, start with Jupyter Dash, because it's so much easier to debug within a Jupyter notebook, as you all know, because for a script like this, you have to have the whole thing execute, and then it will still tell you what line things break at, but it's so much easier when it's done within Jupyter Notebook. So over here, the main difference between this and Jupyter Dash is instead of instantiating a Jupyter Dash object, you're instantiating this over here. So some of these are actually very, very similar to what I was talking about 2 weeks ago with Jupyter Dash. The only things that are different is, let me go down to up. So I have my callbacks, and if you don't remember, callbacks are basically when you want the input of something to affect the output in something else within your dashboard. That's what the callbacks are about. I go into more detail in the video from 2 weeks ago. And then from here, I'm actually defining my my layout. So the layout is actually very, very short here, and I'll go into why in a little bit. But basically, you can see that the title here is dashboard. The app.title is dashboard. That's what it's called, dashboard, up here in my tab. Also here, I instantiate a Dash object instead of a Jupyter Dash object. Server, I wouldn't mess with that. And app.layout is this. Now, this entire div has 3 children: header, subhead is what I called it, and then grid. And what I actually did was I defined all of those HTML elements beforehand. So what I did here, I actually opened up my pickle file, opened my CSV file, and then define my header and all these other things. So for example, I knew that my header is right over here. It has a style of padding at the bottom, and the only thing that it has is an HTML H1. H1 basically like title text, and that's what is rendering the title here. If I were to change this, and something that's actually really neat about Dash, this is my dashboard. Something really nice about Dash is if I save this, this will actually refresh really nicely. It takes a little while because I know I have a pretty big pickle file in there, but it's going to load up and the new title will reflect right away. So this is my dashboard. The rest of the stuff will slowly load up as it loads. So that's a really neat thing about Dash. Also, if there are any error messages, it actually pops up over here. So down here, there's this thing that you can see that the server is running. If I quit this, and I'll show you, if I quit this, it'll say that the server is not running. So we'll just run it again, and that'll come back. And then if there are any errors, the errors will actually pop up here. You can actually go through your error messages. It'll tell you, same way as your Jupyter errors work, it'll just tell you where things are breaking and what you need to fix. Cool. So from here, I'm just defining everything as variables separately. So something that's really nice about Dash is that you can define things in smaller scopes. So here I have the header. Here I actually have my dropdown. And this dropdown for this specific, I had to take out a lot of sensitive information from this, but these are basically a bunch of different IDs that you could potentially drop down if you wanted to. That's all defined here in the actual app. This was something I did for a contract, so therefore I couldn't get you all the data for this to show the full interactive abilities. What is that? Whatever that is. Hold on, I've never seen this before. Okay. What was I saying? So yeah, that's the dropdown basically. The options come from IDs. IDs is something that I defined over here. So I have the drop down here. I have my text input over here as well. So my text input is here. This sample search is place, text input. And then I'm actually combining these two things into the subhead. So I'm coercing it into a row where each one is a column. So that's another thing that you can use to make things easier to organize. And at the bottom, I have the grid, and the grid here on the left has the graph, on the right has the details here. So in the actual app, what came out was this would call on a data frame that would plot out a bunch of user details, of which we don't have here. All right. And then all of this is the same thing that you would have in Jupyter Dash. So all of this, aside from what you instantiate at the very top here, is going to be exactly the same as Jupyter Dash. So my advice, if you just want to do a dashboard, first do it in Jupyter Dash. It's literally copy and paste to do it here. All right. Any questions with this? I think this would be good for like EDA. The example that I showed you all a couple, like last week, I think, where I had like a lot of inputs and outputs to generate results for like that finance thing I was doing. That one is purely Dash as well. Even though there is some modeling that goes on, it's purely a dashboard too. All right, any questions about this one before we move on to Flask? And Flask actually has some modeling involved. So I think most people who are doing front ends for their projects out of like my past students mostly end up doing a Flask app. Okay. Oh, by the way, it's Control-C to quit from this, same as Jupyter. Okay. So next, this is Dash. Let's talk about the other one. So the other one is, did I call it Flask with Dash? Okay, yeah. So next is, no, I don't want to do Flask with Dash. Sorry. I want to do Flask app. Okay. Let's do that one. Right, so next we're in Flask app, and Flask app, there are a lot more files. I'm going to talk through those. But first, let me launch the Flask app. Actually, let me launch this and then launch the Flask app. So we'll talk about this in a little bit. And then to launch the Flask app, it's a little bit of a longer command, but it's basically Python, whichever version of Python you're using. -m, I forget what -m means, to be honest. And then you're going to do Flask run. So Flask is basically a framework that allows you to host things. If you're building a very, very simple website, and actually quite a few big websites, I think, started off being Flask apps. Anyways, similar to what we were doing before, it comes out with this URL. All you have to do is copy and paste this URL into your browser. So this was an NLP project that I did for fun with some friends. It's basically like an innuendo detector. Simple classification. Is it innuendo? Is it not? And so how it works is, this is just the front page of it. I even linked my GitHub over here. I'll just put in some like random input, press submit, and then it'll tell you whether it's innuendo or not. So that's what this project is. Very, very simple HTML in terms of, you know, how fancy it looks, but I'll explain what I did here. And then here I have classify another to bring it back to the home page. Okay, and this is likely what most of you are going to be using, I think. All right, so there are quite a few things to talk about here. First, I think it's useful to talk about functions.py. Functions.py is basically where I define all of my pre-processing as well as my prediction functions. So because this was an NLP project, I have like my lemmatizer, for example, that I used. Have like English stop words. I'm also importing, you know, the same libraries that you would in your notebooks. So what I have here is these are functions that will pre-process my data for me. And it will pre-process it in a way that can go straight into my prediction function. Not the best way to define a function. I also don't know why I decided to put a function within a function. I should not have done that, but this is what I did like 2-3 years ago. But anyways, you can see here I'm opening my TF-IDF pickle. I had like an additional filter on my words. So that's a pickle over there. And then I have my classification function where I load up my naive Bayes model. So this MNB stands for multinomial naive Bayes. I loaded that up and then I use my pre-process function here and then use my dot predict and I get my result. And I believe this result gives you either a 0 or a 1. Depending on the class. Any questions about this process? Now, one really, really good way to test, and I think this should be the first thing that you do if you want to take your modeling and put it on a web app, is to functionalize and script all of your stuff. So what I recommend is, turn as many things into functions as possible, and then put it into a Py file like this. So functions.py, that's what this file is called. And it's literally mostly, other than defining a few variables that I'm going to need to use later on, like in my English, my lematizer. Other than that, everything is defined within a function. And you can use as many helper functions as you like as well. And then a way to check if this works is in a brand new Jupyter notebook, just import this file. And I'll show you that import statement. That import statement looks like, where is it? Yeah, the import statement just like this, from functions import star. That's basically running the entire functions.py file here. And if it works, then you're all set. You should be all set. All right, any questions about this part? And this is like initial setup. All right. So from here, I think a good next step is to look at app.py. Now, app.py for Flask is slightly different from app.py for your dashboard, because app.py here is telling your web app how to work and how to route information. So from here, to be honest, I'm not too sure why you have to do this. I mean, yes, you are instantiating your Flask app. I'm not sure what that is either. And then this ending part, you just need to have it there. I don't know why. So for this, app routes, and anytime you see anything with an is it ampersand? Not ampersand, but like an @ sign above a defined function, that's a decorator for the function. So in this specific scenario, the decorator basically tells it what URL to render what. What I mean by that is here you can see that these routes are all just like slashes, because this URL doesn't have anything after it, but this one over here, it says /test. So if I were to go on here and do /test, you can actually see it renders, hi, this is a test, from here, hi, this is a test. I can literally make another one as well and be like test2, and then put, hi, this is another test. And this is literally how you get multiple pages on a Flask web app. So I don't know if this will auto save. I honestly don't remember if Flask works that way. I think if I do a quit and then redo again. Oops. What did I do? Oh, it's because the two functions are the same. So the two functions have to be different. That is my bad. Let's do that again. There we go. So if I do test2, it says, hi, this is another test. So if you want to have multiple pages on your web app, some people actually use Flask apps to showcase their portfolio. So you could have like multiple models going on over here. I have not gotten into that much depth with any front end before, but you could do it. I've seen some of my former students do it. So anyways, with this, that's what the route means. So app route here, and these are very, very simple functions. They'll just render whatever you want. You can use Python HTML with this as well. But more likely what you'll be doing is you'll be doing machine learning modeling. So with that, let's go back to the base page. And you can see that with this route of just slash, I have two functions, because one is getting the info. So you can see here I have methods equal to get, and here I'm, I guess, receiving info, the classification result basically. So methods equal to post over here. So here, what I'm doing is I'm rendering my classifier and I'm rendering this HTML template. So I'll show you all that HTML template in a little bit, but what this function is saying is literally, if I'm at this base URL, render this HTML template. And then over here, I have the post request, which is basically the information that you get, the classification result. And it's also off of the same URL. So you can see that no matter what I type here, that URL does not change. All right. So from here, and this is going to come back later, I'm running a predict method or defining a predict function, and none of these have arguments, which is interesting to think, or interesting to, not interesting, but good to note that it's not taking in any arguments at all. Here, I'm actually collecting the text, and I'll show you all where this is, but here, just be sure that you have some sort of request to obtain the text that I'm feeding into over here. And it comes up in the HTML template later, and I'll show you all where that is and what to keep track of. But you're getting the text from this page, and then I'm literally running it through my classified text function from my functions.py. So, oops, where is that at? Okay, so that's where that is from. And then see if prediction equal to 0, render a no template. If prediction equal to 1, render a, this is a that's what she said classifier. So that's what that is. I think if I do like, I don't know, I don't want to do that on a YouTube recording, but anyways, different HTML templates will come up. And then with that, that's how you do your machine learning classification over a web page. So next I want to show you all the HTML. So for HTML, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but this is the entire HTML for this page. It's actually quite simple. It's literally just text here, another line of text here. I got a GIF from here, another line of text, an input text box, submit button, and I just added a link to my GitHub because this is actually hosted on a web page somewhere as well. So with that, I want to break down the most important parts of an HTML template. And this is actually written in HTML. So the file extension is .html. So for HTML, and I'm also not an expert, which is why none of these look complicated or very nice. But from here, you can see that there are two main sections. First, there is a head section, which is basically like metadata. And then this is the body. So what I was talking about, how you have like every line going down is all defined here. So I'll come back to the head later, but in the body, you can see that I have my H1, where it's like, did she say that? That's what's over here. I have my innuendo detector or text classifier over there. This is an embedded GIF that I literally just copied and pasted this off of Jiffy, and put some words over there. And then the thing that I wanted to like remind you of that goes back into how you obtain the text is from here. So it's a form. Let me zoom in a little bit more. So it's a form over here. The method is post, so that it knows that when you're going off to your post page, this is what you need to get. And then the name is what's most important. So the name is here. It is the text. The type is text. I probably should have named it something different, but this defines that text box. So this input defines the text box. So this over here is that. And the name text is important because if you go back to the app over here, it is getting text. So that's how it knows what to read it to the function. All right, so here, there's also a button for the submit button. That's easy. You can have it say whatever you want as well. And then finally, I have my URL to my GitHub. So that's what that is. Now within the head, you can actually define, I think the head is important for a couple of things. One, the title of the web page. So mine is called Did She Say That? That's what the title is there. Next, you can also define default styles. So in terms of styles, I have some styles determined over here. So for example, I have one called center, and everything here will have will be called center. So here. So if I add class equal to center, that means it'll follow this center formatting. And then I also like define some default colors for different kinds of elements. So all H1s will be this color, all H3s will be this color, all H4s will be this color. That's what that is. And that's pretty much an HTML page. If you want to add things to it, you can just try and follow this as much as possible. A lot of HTML resources. There are more HTML resources than there are Python resources because I think HTML is just more widely used. So all of this I got off of Google. It takes a bit of getting used to, but I don't think it's as hard as figuring out like machine learning or like for loops and stuff. So that's classifier. For any sort of input, the result is actually the same. So if you remember, if we go back to app.py, depending on what the output of the prediction is, I'll render a different template. And both these templates are exactly the same, just different words for what it is. So I'll go over one of them. So this is the one that we have. Again, the title, I just changed the title to say she did not because it's not innuendo in this case. I have the same styles and everything here. And then in terms of the body, it's literally just this. So in terms of the body, it's you said this. And oh, by the way, to get this variable over here, I believe you just read in variable from here. Yeah, variable is equal to text. So it knows that wherever I have the variable, it's that. So how it knows to re-render my input text there is it says variable equal to text when I'm rendering the template. And then when I go over here, this is just like the syntax for F, like kind of like F string or string interpolation for Python. This is how you do it. You got to put like 2 sets of curly brackets around there. And then I just have an H3, I have an H1, I have the GIF again, and then a link to classify another. And the link is literally, there's no link because the URL is exactly the same. So that is the HTML template for one of the results. The other one is exactly the same. If you go into like this one, you'll see it's exactly the same, just instead it says, that's what she said. That's the only difference. All right, any questions at this point? All right, as you can see here, all of my stuff are in pickle files. So actually, let me open this. In my Flask app, all of the stuff is in pickles. All of the HTML files have to be within a templates folder. I don't know why that is, but it has to be in a templates folder. So all these HTML documents are in a templates folder. I have some NLTK data here. Honestly, this is why the file is so big. I'm not sure why I needed the NLTK data there in order to host it on a web page. And I'll show you all what that is at the end. And then all of these other things like proc file, requirements.txt. I'll send you all like a list of instructions that I actually followed to get this hosted, because those are all files that you need to be able to host your thing online. All right, and a VENV is like a virtual environment. In the instructions that I'll send out, same thing. It'll outline how to do this. All right, any questions about just this Flask app? At this moment, I think it's important to mention that you don't have to do a front end for the capstone. You really don't have to. I do recommend it because it does give you something that you can directly link to someone to see the results of your data science project, rather than having them scroll through like a GitHub, an entire GitHub. You can link this onto your GitHub as well, so that you don't have to go through, I don't know, all your notebooks and such. So I do think it's an easier way to just show off your projects. Okay. Next, I'm going to show you all Flask with Dash, and that is the most complicated one. You would do that if you want to have both dashboard functionalities as well as Flask capabilities. So you can have a couple pages of dashboards and then a couple pages of your machine learning modeling being on Flask. So to show you that, let me quit this first. And to quit this is also it's also Control-C. All right, so let me just resize this so it's a little bit easier to see. Oh, by the way, to clear your terminal, I don't know if anyone knows that yet. To clear your terminal, all you have to do is Command-K on a Mac. I don't know about PC, sorry. All right, so if we're in Flask, let's go to the other one. So the other one, I called it Flask with Dash. And the way that you run that one is similar to the very first one. And I'll show you why it's this in particular. But to run this one, actually, let me just open it up and add it first. Okay, so now that we have this here, okay, next we're going to run that. So we're going to do Python 3 run.py instead of app.py. Okay, so it's running and it is running on this URL. This anymore. And so here I have my dashboard. I always keep forgetting to do this, but I could technically put another URL to link to my modeling page, which I forgot to do. But I know that if I want to get to my modeling page, it's in /model. And this is actually my actual like phase 3 project that I did when I was a student. I did not do this during phase 3, by the way. But here you can see this is a text classifier to see if something is more artsy or more programming. So if I type in Python and click submit, you can see that this is a more programming piece of text. And if I say like something like painting, this will be more of an art piece of text. And so to do this part is very similar, but I do want to show you all the file structure of Flask with Dash because that is the most confusing part. So where did I have that? Okay. Oh, actually, no, let me show it to you all via Atom. All right, so actually, let me show it to you all both ways. I think that'll be easier. Thanks. Okay. So here within Flask with Dash, everything is within this thing called a Dash package. I don't know why it has to be this way. I honestly am not as well versed with the software engineering aspect myself, but you're basically running this run.py. And run.py looks like this. Run.py has pretty much nothing on it. It's importing the app from my Dash package, but it is running. This is how you run the app. Everything else is inside Dash package. Also, I put like a list of notes, and these have all the notes of like running all of these front ends. So if you're interested, it's in the Flask with Dash folder, because I used to do each of these separate, and I realized I didn't need to do that. Okay. Anyways, in the run.py file, just have this. I don't know why it has to be like this. This is something that I learned from Dash's documentation. This is how they ask you to set it up. Next most important thing to look at is this file called init.py. And init.py is within the Dash package, it's out here. And init.py has this information. It instantiates the Flask app. It also defines the Dash app. Those are the most important things. And from the Dash app, you can tell it which path name, or yeah, which URL path name you want the Dash app itself to be on. And then by default, the URL that they give you here is /dash. It will be this one over here. By the way, I have warnings over here because this is an older version of the TF-IDF vectorizer, and that's why all the warnings are popping up here. So warnings will pop up in your terminal if you have warnings. I don't think I suppressed them either. Okay, so this is the init.py. I just recommend copying this over if you were to use it. And then I'm importing the routes or the roots, however you want to call it. So roots file is also over here. It is this file over here. And from the roots.py is where I have the different app.server.roots, which is similar to what we did with the Flask app. So what we have over here is the dashboard. You just return app.index. That's how it knows that on this page, return this Dash app. And I'll show you all where that is later as well. And then here, I'm just defining a bunch of others. This is exactly the same as the one I talked about before, where you have /model with a GET request, /model with a POST request. So here I'm rendering the classifier. Over here, I put in my text, it will render a different topic, a different page, depending on the classification result. This part, exactly the same as the last example that I showed. What else? Oh, and also here, same as before, you can add additional pages if you want. If you want this to be like your portfolio site or anything, you can have like an about me page. I've seen that. I've seen more of like technical explanation page. I've had a couple students do things like that as well. So here, if I do like /hello, /hello, it's over here. It's Sidebase because one of my older cohorts decided to name themselves my Sidebase. So that's why that's there. Anyways, so that is in the routes file. Okay, next in functions, exactly the same as the last one, actually. I have my pre-processing functions here. I also put a couple functions here, and these functions, again, the order doesn't matter because you're just calling on individual functions, but these functions, I'll come back to this when I talk about the dashboard component. So I have my functions here. The templates for the HTML, they're all in the templates here as well. So you can see that I have my programming, same thing. I pretty much just have an image. Actually, let me just render that real quick. I type in Python. This is just a meme that I found. So it gives you the meme. put some text over here, and you have the text to classify another. So that's all there. And then all of your images have to be in a folder called static, similar to how every HTML file has to be in a templates folder. That is also how it is. I don't know why, because here, I'm not sure why it has to be like that, but it works like that. If it's not within a static folder, for some reason, it does not work. Okay, and then I also have my pickles over here, same as before. Next, let's talk about the dashboard part. So this dashboard part, exactly the same as how you would define a Jupyter dash. So here, this one is very, very simple. It doesn't use any callbacks, but I do want to show that I'm importing from functions. So I'm doing from dash package.functions import star. I'll talk about why you have to do dash package.functions later, actually right after this. But I also wanted to show that within any of these dashboards or any of these graphs in the dashboards, I can use functions defined in other places. So for example, my title is say hello, and say hello is a say hello function that just returns hello. That's why that says hello over there. And you can see that this is running. So if I change this to saying hello, I believe this should update in a little bit. There we go, saying hello. So you can use functions within your Flask with Dash app as well. Also, I'm doubling some numbers, having some numbers, returning a graph title. That's what's over there. And if I go back to my dashboard file, you can see that I'm using the doubling function. I'm having some numbers, and I have the title over there. Now, these are just, this is just Plotly syntax, which takes a little bit of getting used to. For those of you who have worked with Plotly already, you might have come across Plotly Express. Plotly Express works perfectly fine in here as well. So instead of rendering like dcc.graph, blah, 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 you can just do px dot whatever, and that renders as well. I've tried that on a more recent project. Cool. Next, the reason that I have to do dash package dot functions, that's kind of an annoying thing, but it's because I'm running this entire web app or page from not here. I'm actually running it from outside here. So I'm actually running everything from the level of run.py, which is why whenever I need to access anything else within the dash package, even though I'm calling it from, for example, dashboard.py, I still have to do dash package.functions because it's reading this from the run level. And you kind of see this in other places as well, I think. Let's see, from dash package import app, that's what that is too. Yeah, if it wasn't dash package import app, it would just be, if it wasn't being run from one level up, it would just be from import, it would just be import app. What else? From routes, you can see that in dash package.function, dash package.dashboard. If you're confused as to whether you need to do it or not, you will get thrown an error and things will not run. The error, it will tell you what it is over here. If it says like file not found, module not found, you'll just have to change it. Just do like dash package dot or remove the dash package dot if you put it somewhere you didn't need it. Okay, so I think that is it. Let me just double check real quick. There's just a lot of files in here that you just have to get used to navigating. That Flask with Dash is the most complicated one because the way that the files are structured, very, very imperative for your app to work. Yeah, our old phase 1 project used to be to build a very simple version of this, which I did, and it was awful. But we didn't do any like base Python or anything back then. It was just this. So yeah. Any questions? I highly, highly recommend if you want to like efficiently use your time, just take one of these templates and replace it with your own model or your own code. I think because, yeah, because everything should have been pickled. I tried my best to pickle everything, so all of them should run even on your machines. Cool. Any questions regarding this? Okay. Next thing I want to show you all is basically if you have a package that isn't downloaded. For example, I know that I ran this using Python 3 and my Python 2 doesn't have anything. So if I do python2 run.py, if you get something like this and you see no module name Flask or no module name like dash, blah, 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 all you have to do is do like a pip install of, what is it, Flask. And then that should be fine. And I would say, because you all likely have not worked with Flask, have not worked with all of these different dash things, whatever it tells you it doesn't have a module, whatever it says that you don't have, just pip install it and it should be fine. All right. Any other questions at this point? Okay. And you can see that because this is not running anymore, the server is unavailable. It also keeps saying updating because the server is unavailable. All right. Cool. Definitely recommend work off of one of these templates. Also, make sure that you're changing everything. Like, I've seen a bunch of people give me front ends, and then the titles are like the titles that I use. So don't forget to change those. You can definitely change colors if you want. Make it look like your own. Also, yeah, remember that this is not necessary to pass your capstone, but I'm happy to help debug and figure out what's going on with your front ends if you do want to work on it. I know that after you all graduate, I do have like a period of time with much fewer students, so more than happy to help. Okay, now with that, next week. So next week's study groups are going to be mostly like qualitative and preparing for your job search. So all of you should already be in contact and having meetings with your career coaches. So I've been hearing from a bunch of you, so that's good. So starting Tuesday, I'll be talking about how to configure your GitHub, not configure, but how to make your GitHub look good to an employer. Wednesday, I'll be talking about resumes. I think this will pretty much in line with when you should be working on resumes for your career coaches. Thursday, I made it into like an open office hours, or if I have anything important that I forgot to talk about, I will do that then. But right now, I'll put Thursday as open office hours. And then finally on the Friday, our last study group, I'll talk about interview prep, which means like resources that you can use for your interviews, also what to expect at different kinds of interviews, because there are a lot of different kinds of interviews that you can encounter throughout your job search. Finally, don't forget that next Tuesday will be your capstone presentations. I allotted 2 hours because everyone's going to do their capstone presentations and we will be done. And then you just have to pass your project review by the 22nd. Any questions regarding that? All right. If there's nothing else, let me stop the recording here.